Origin Chess, Home Reaction. This is China's new stealth aircraft built to fight US by channel task and purpose. Yes, this is the latest task and purpose video. It's about J-36. Is that the name? I think that's the name. The latest stealth aircraft that was showed by China a month or so ago. A lot of speculation, what it is, what it's not. It's a gigantic plane. This is by channel task and purpose. It's gonna be awesome. Let's watch it.
In the skies above China, a prototype military aircraft was recently captured on camera during a rare daytime flight that appeared to show their top secret 6th generation J-36 fighter. If this prototype legitimately has the capabilities that these new images suggest that it has, then it could mean that the Chinese Air Force is leaps ahead in development than some previously thought. But what exactly are we seeing here? Is this a new Chinese fighter, some kind of mini bomber, or is it a copycat of an existing American aircraft? People that were watching on the ground near the Chengdu Aircraft Corporation factory airfield were able to capture these never before seen high definition images of the J-36. But choosing to reveal these images is always a double-edged sword because it gives us insight into how the plane might be used in combat. Let's first talk about what we've learned about its weapon systems, because if you're like me, that's what makes you Hua the hardest. But before we get into that, I noticed that one of the things you guys always tell me in the comment section is how you appreciate that I try my best to stay objective and unbiased with reporting. Ground News is a website and an app that gathers news from all over the world and it puts it in one place. Then it gives me a clear way to navigate how every story is.
Yeah, people go to original video page link and from there support this channel or go to groundnews.com/task.
News a shot by clicking the link in the description down below or the pinned comment below. Take a look at the underbelly, the soft, exposed, and vulnerable part, most delicate part of the J-36. They reveal an internal weapons bay that if we measure it, it's about 6 meters long or 19 feet. And wouldn't you know it, in October 2022, the Chinese Air Force had just released their long-range air-to-air missile, the PL-17, and it just so happens that that missile is also roughly 6 meters long or 19 feet. Color me shocked. These are beyond visual range, active radar-guided missiles, and according to the Royal United Services Institute, they can hit targets out to about 400 kilometers, although I've seen other sources place it at like 500 kilometers, which is like 300 miles. Let's just say it's in that range and give me a little bit of leeway here. To give some reference, the distance from mainland China to Japan is only 500 miles, but it could also be potentially configured to carry a large air-to-surface bomb. If we make an educated guess based on the size of the weapons bay, it could carry China's YJ-100 long-range air-launched cruise missile that has a range of 900 miles. This would be used for precision strikes against high-value targets, including ships and ground installations. Why is that important to note? Because it's likely, in the event of war in the Pacific, the first tactic that China would use with this J-36 would be to strike targets in Japan and South Korea. And that's a major hint as to how they might use this aircraft. Okay, so an important air combat concept that we need to understand is something called kinematic qualities. Kinetic qualities of a weapon refers to the speed, altitude, and angle of the launching platform at the time of the missile's release. To maximize its kill potential, if the jet is already moving fast and it has a high altitude, then the missile gets a buff. It gets a multiplier effect to its range and speed. But it's not just that big main weapons bay that it uses. There are two smaller weapons bays that could be given a range of smaller munitions. But the type of weapons that it will ultimately carry is going to probably depend on the role that it ends up filling.
Yeah, so when it comes to missile boost, I guess when it comes to speed, it's not gonna matter much because missiles go at Mach ridiculous speeds, hypersonic, right? But the point is from the standstill to whatever Mach 1, that might require a lot of energy because it's from standstill, right? Once it's airborne, right? It doesn't use that much energy compared to that standstill thing. So if you're already Mach 1, Mach 2 plane just launches missile, you can have extended range compared to if you launch something from the ground or something from standstill.
As of time of publishing this video, none of its specs have been leaked on War Thunder, so we don't know for sure yet. And herein lies the question that fascinates me. Will the J-36 be a bomber, a fighter, or a multi-role jet? What in God's good name are we looking at here? I know a lot of people in the comments say that I always just say China weapons bad, US weapons good, but it's not that simple. I don't think that's true. I find Chinese history and their people fascinating. I find researching their military engaging, otherwise I wouldn't do it. I view China as a rival and an adversary, so of course I poke fun here and there. But at the end of the day, my goal here isn't to just shit on a Chinese airplane for the sake of shitting on a Chinese airplane.
I mean, you can just like take something like a $20 trillion economy and just say like, oh, they're not good at anything. Look at everything, like like cars, Chinese cars, Chinese smartphones is like basically dominates the market, right? There's only Samsung and like Apple, Google too. Why not? Everything else is basically Chinese. Look at the bike market. I'm a bike guy. Chinese bikes are becoming a thing, and they're actually good. Like okay, so yeah, China is just like getting better in all sectors. So it wouldn't be surprising that they're actually slowly getting better in like military and everything like that, right? And it's money talks. It's $20 trillion economy. They can like sink in money to do things.
What's the value in that? My goal here is to actually look at the facts and expert opinions on it. To try to reverse engineer the J-36 role, we need to look at what we can learn based on her shapes. One of the first things you'll notice is that the Chinese J-36 is basically just a flat flying triangle, aka a delta wing configuration for people who have that type of aviationism. This tells us two key factors. One, it's a stealth jet, no surprise there, and two, it's designed for endurance at supersonic speeds. One of the biggest trade-offs when you design your aircraft like a flying Dorito is that they don't do well for subsonic or slower than speed of sound, and they tend to be a bit heavier with all the drawbacks that come with that. The extra weight is definitely something to be considered here because this aircraft is pretty massive. From the pictures, it appears to be at least as long as the 70-foot nose to tail of the J-20, but significantly wider. There are a couple reasons why you'd want to make an aircraft that large. The first and simplest reason is that you can fit more stuff into it, like sensors and weapon systems, but more importantly, and this is really what we're going to dive into, is its fuel. It can carry more fuel. Aviation experts like Tyler Rodgeway at the War Zone believes that fuel aspect is critical with understanding the J-36's role, because combining the size and shape of the aircraft tells us that its purpose is to have a long combat radius aspect.
It feels like that. It might be more like, even though they have H-20, I think it would be more like in the middle of like how B-21 is. The US is already trying to do this with B-21. Like, what if B-21 does like air-to-air combat or like air-to-ground combat? Not just bomber, but beyond bomber capabilities. Because nowadays, like, dogfighting is not going to be a thing. In the sky from like hundreds of kilometers away, miles away, a missile can take out something with an insane technology, right? So a B-21 can do that. Why not? That kind of thing. So China might be like, okay, got the wind of that. Like, okay, US is doing that. We might do that as well. So this might be just one of those things, right? B-21 like plane. I think proper B-21 like plane. They're trying to do H-20. This would be something in between. Why not?
As possible. Basically, how far it can fly before it has to turn around and get gas. You can have the stealthiest jet in the world, but if it has to hook up to a tanker to refuel every couple of hours, you might as well cover it in PT belts.
If I'm gonna be a dad, I'm gonna do dad jokes.
Why is added distance?
He's like a ninja hiding in corner, but he has to take a one number, go to bathroom. Then wait a minute and just like open the door. You hear the sound, water sound flushing and going back to hiding. Yeah, that's not gonna work. You better learn how to hold your pee.
More important for China specifically, it's not impossible, but unlikely that they would be doing flying bombing missions far away from China. Their focus is likely on Taiwan, only 100 miles away. On the tactical level, this increased range would allow the Chinese Air Force to position the J-36 further inland, which keeps them further away from the United States and its allies' ground-launched cruise missiles. With the aircraft positioned deeper inside China, potentially, it would be more safe and difficult to hit while it's at its most vulnerable on the ground. Sure, America's B-21 or B-1 could still reach it anywhere in China, but they would have to run the gauntlet of flying over enemy airspace for longer periods of time. I can't show jets getting blown up in giant fireballs here on YouTube, but I did a collaboration with Habitual Line Crosser where we analyzed analyze uncensored combat footage of fighter jets being shot down out of the sky by missiles. He's an active duty US Army Patriot missile air defender, so he knows what he's talking about. And the link is in the description to Pepperbox. You get a free 2-week trial, and then it's $7.99 a month after that if you want to stick around for my weekly exclusive combat footage analysis that's too spicy for here. You also get exclusive content from Fat Electrician, Angry Cops, and much more. Fuel capacity is a huge priority for their Air Force specifically. And if you look at Chinese aircraft specifications versus Western equivalents, you might be surprised to find that a lot of times they have longer ranges. There's always a trade-off for that, but that's what they prioritize a lot. The reason for this is because China's tanker fleet, their aerial refuel fleet, is both really old and really small. They're working on building a new tanker.
Yeah, you can't really compete in logistics against USA. That's the thing here, right? USA can do that all day long, refueling and all that. But yeah, China, like I guess they're probably working at that, like how to close the gap with USA with all that shit. But right now they have to like work around and find loopholes and shit like that.
Fleet with their Y-20 aircraft, but it won't be up to speed for a decade or so. The Chinese Air Force has to be incredibly conservative when it comes to deploying them because of how comically large targets they make. It's fair to estimate that this aircraft will have a range of up to around 1,800 kilometers. The reason I say that is because their J-20 maxes out at around 1,200 kilometers, and that carries significantly less fuel. American
Yeah, but
NGAD
it looks really big. Shouldn't it have like higher range? Like I don't know if it's like big enough to be a bomber or B-21 type of way. B2, B-21, all these have like insane ranges, like 4,000-5,000 kilometers something. So I don't know. They should have like 2,500 or something. I don't know. But that implies if they're using that space for fuel. Otherwise, I don't know what I don't know. It's better stealthy. Why would big thing be stealthy? I guess less edges and things. They can smooth out edges. I don't know.
GADs, or the 6th generation, next generation aircraft, are expected to have around 1,500 kilometers of range, and the Chinese aircraft generally have a longer combat radius than their American counterparts. Noticeably gone from this aircraft, though, is any kind of tail or vertical stabilizers. This usually helps with keeping the plane off of radars, and it helps decrease air drag.
You don't need it.
But at the cost of, well, pretty much everything else. Flying wing type designs are
Yeah,
notorious.
but you don't need it. I think NG80 is gonna go similar route as well. That's why they're putting a shelf or something. I don't know. You don't need like like air combat maneuverability and things like that. Dogfighting is not a big thing. Again, that's why B-21 is like considered to be used as something beyond bomber. Because if you're just going to be at the long distances, you don't need to turn that quickly.
Notoriously hard to control, even when the plane is just cruising around, and the computer controls in the avionics will be doing a majority of the heavy lifting in keeping this thing stable. But it largely means that it's probably not designed to go toe-to-toe with other aircraft. Instead, the goal is going to be to either stay undetected and avoid a fight, or to shoot and scoot at enemy aircraft from incredibly long distances before they can react. Whenever I try to understand China's perspective on something from their own point of view, I go to Zhao Da Shui on X. They're a self-proclaimed member of the People's Armed Police Propaganda Bureau.
It's like getting to read your adversary's diary to know all their deepest, darkest thoughts.
It's basically Chinese communist.
Okay, but even with the like profile picture and all that, okay, I didn't see that coming. But yeah, I think they're not gonna use this plane to like head-to-head fighting anyway. It's just like you need to protect your like top asset, right? All countries, even USA does that. US's best plane B2, they basically never use that. Like they all use all the other planes. F-22, F-35, they're not gonna use that. They have like F-15 and something. Why use the best one? They're gonna do the same thing if they have to use it. Like Task and Papa said, they're just gonna use that from mainland China and never come close.
Party propaganda in purely distilled, concentrated form, but it's still worth reading to see what they think of their aircraft from their perspective. Zhao said, quote, "Now that our 6th generation fighters are made public, the sale of the 5th generation fighters to Pakistan is a done deal. By having the PLA Air Force 2 generations ahead of the Indian Air Force, with the Pakistani Air Force 1st generation ahead of India, would ensure proper strategic containment of India. A strong alliance in South Asia, including..."
What containment? You need to contain India? I don't even know when last time India tried to take anything. conquer, try to do anything. You, India's pacifist, man. Like like you attack first, then we'll answer. It is the policy. It's always been the case. You're the one who does all the aggressing shit. Oh, by the way, this place belong to me now. Like, okay, and all the disputed shit is like, pre, like independence and shit, right? 1947, pre that, like we inherited that shit. Like, okay, come on, this is geopolitics at that point. India isn't trying to take a place from China or shit or Pakistan or something, right? And it's not gonna like change much. Like, okay, Pakistan is better technology plane. That's not gonna change the tide suddenly, right? India is still India. I mean, come on.
Including Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka, will negate any form of sabotaging attempts against the global south by the US via their clients in India. End quote. So it's interesting to see China likely sees this fighter as a way to sell aircraft to Pakistan and to contain India. This raises an important question of production. Let's assume the J-36 aircraft is everything they claim it to be and more. Let's assume it's an absolute miracle of an aircraft. There's still the question of, can it be produced at large scale, or is it a prototype meant more for public relations purposes? I want to warn you that we are about to walk into a long contested and long running debate about exactly how effective these Chinese aircrafts really are. There have been attempts to reverse engineer its abilities based on other factors. For instance, we know for a fact that the Chinese Communist Party has long run a program for many years where they've offered large sums of money to former US military pilots to train their Chinese pilots. The US government has arrested former pilots for training Chinese military pilots. This would suggest to me China is still behind the US in trying to learn some of those pilot skills.
I mean,
Just the fact
obviously.
that it flew in daytime, in public, while there happen to be a ton of people on the ground filming and posting videos online, isn't a coincidence. Even this tells us something. It's almost certain that China specifically wanted these images out in the public as a way of
I mean, it's China. If Chinese government doesn't want something to be out, no one's gonna have like balls or freedom in China to post those things, right? It's not really known for freedom, right? Yeah, all those social points will go out of the window. Nobody's gonna risk that. So there's a reason why this image is out. China wanna flex that. Like, look at there you go. For whatever reason, it's like flex can be either flex, or it could be like for business purposes as well, selling to Pakistan and things like that, like strengthening ties. Like, look at the we have sixth generation. Even US doesn't have that. We have sixth generation. Like, we're stronger. So China, Russia, all these people can like look up to China now, and China can sell things, right? Can become a proper military equipment seller, like how Russia and US been in the past. China is already doing that, but now at an even bigger scale. Like Pakistan, but other countries can line up now.
claiming that their plane is an actual threat and that it's ahead of the timeline of the American sixth generation fighter. So a little bit of a PR war going on here. Xi Jinping might as well be looking straight at us and saying, hey, look at my shiny new toy. Right after the test flight took place, the United States Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition Technology and Logistics, Andrew Hunter, acknowledged that the Chinese J-36 might reach initial operational capability before the American sixth generation fighter program does. But he believed that the US Air Force would have better capability because of the Air Force's technical
Block 4, F-35 Block 4. That's still in the like. USA is flexing like we're gonna turn our fifth into six, and then we're gonna make a sixth one. That's what we're doing, right? That's what America's flexing right now.
advantages. It's like my old squad leader used to always say, it's not about who gets there first, it's about who gets there best.
Oftentimes, this news of new Chinese or Russian equipment comes out. The US military then kind of uses it as an excuse to get a blank check from the military industrial complex. Even the United States military, that has hundreds of fifth generation combat aircraft proven in combat, they have a whole fleet. They're currently struggling with their own sixth generation aircraft. The US just recently announced they were
Look, man, I'm not a hater here, as all you've been watching my channel know. If there is a positive thing about Pakistan, China, rivals of India, I would still say it, because To me it's childish, all this like this is my country, this is my border, like I'm gonna like say negative things about China because I'm Indian. That's just childish to me. I'm a very scientific guy, right? So I don't do that, right? I mean, obviously I'm patriot, I'm gonna defend my country, but in the end of the day, like, if somebody does something good, I'm gonna applaud it, doesn't matter who it is. China is known for like ramping up production like nobody else can do it type of way. So I won't be surprised if China suddenly like blows up the like production like that and be like, what the fuck, where that come from? They did that with their like fifth generation plane, J-25. What was that? The other one, right? And it was like made like about hundreds of them like instantly. Like, yeah, US can struggle with it because like bureaucracy, a lot of shit happens there, politics. China doesn't have to go through all that, right? China and like their government or whatever it is, right? What you call it? I forgot the name of that. Russia has Kremlin. What is in China? I don't know. So Chinese whole thing, right? As Xi Jinping and his people can just like ramp up things like, okay, here's the money. I need this done by this time, and they can just do it. In COVID time, they built a hospital in a week. Are you kidding me? That's insanity, right? I'm a civil engineer. I build factories and big industrial shed, power plants and things. And to me, that's insane. As soon as I'm like, what the fuck? Where that come from?
Stopping further production on the 6th gen aircraft until the new administration comes in and decides what to do with the program. The fact that it's called a 6th generation aircraft is even kind of a gray area. Tactically speaking, what we expect from a J-36 if it's a 6th gen is that most 6th generation combat aircraft will likely have a manned aircraft and a unmanned companion component. This manned aircraft will do command and control for those drones. It'll kind of act as a intelligence gathering and kind of a central node for the formation for communication. This would hypothetically, if it works, like they claim, it would be of major benefit to any Chinese military operation against Taiwan. The air and naval battle will be the priority in that fight. So if hypothetically China is able to deploy,
as soon as any clip comes of like fighting any cannon, I'm like, YouTube's gonna bitch about this. Probably will. We'll see.
Low-cost drone aircraft, it would potentially help overwhelm Taiwan's defenses. Instead of it being a fighter, it's more probably likely to be a dedicated strike aircraft under the JHXX program. The JXX program is this naming convention given by Western intelligence agencies to describe China's next-gen aircraft programs. At least that's what my handler told me to tell you. The JHXX is a supersonic stealth tactical fighter bomber aircraft. It's hard to tell from the images that we have, but the cockpit seems to potentially be able to hold two pilots sitting next to each other, which is similar to how Russia's Su-34 or America's old F-111 were laid out. Moving on from talking about shapes, one of the weirdest things that you'll notice from this aircraft, that at the least from the outside, is this thing has 3 engines. Even my public school education infantry brain can see that's sort of weird. This comes from the 2 inlets on the bottom side of the plane that closely resembles the J-20s and a large intake on top, which resembles something like the United States Navy's X-40.
Center thing could be a massive afterburner or something for need basis, because stealth planes should have like what is it called, super cruise or whatever. Without the afterburner, they should do like Mach 1 plus, right? So the two engines are supposed to do that, and center thing could be like a massive afterburner for if you need to get the hell out of there, right? The Vin Diesel quote, I'll live my life in like quarter mile or whatever, like get the fuck out, right? So wheelie and everything. That could be that. Or maybe they didn't develop the big engines yet, so they're just using 3 of them to make up for it. And development's underway, I don't know.
47B, and the 3 visible engine outlets in the back nested into the body of the aircraft. But like all of God's mysteries, there are a ton of reasons as to why that might be. But we do have a pretty good idea as to why they went with 3 engines. China is good at building walls, spyware disguised as short-form video, but what their track record has shown, walls, spyware disguised as short-form video.
Is this not his? I think what is? Wait a minute. What is the joke here? This is not his. Somebody created this account.
Video. But what their track record has shown that they're not as great at building is modern fighter engines. Engines specifically. Could the J-36 be a start of a new chapter of a super Chinese?
I think the problem with China is like we shouldn't see precedent of the past. We obviously like, okay, China is not known for this. Yeah, but China is rapidly changing a lot. Like I said, like you can feel it, right? With the everyday things, commercial things like smartphones. Like I said, all the shit, TV, smartphones, all the appliances. China is kind of becoming dominant at everything, right? So maybe that's the thing of the past. Maybe in military complex, they've changed a lot, and they don't want people to know that. And China can like suppress things and don't let like any news go out. Maybe they made some advances in like engines and things, and nobody knows about it, right? China can do that.
Engines, some experts are saying that the three engines is a new prototype called the WS-10C, which were originally reverse engineered Western CFM56 engines, which are designed by France and the United States. But up until just a few years ago, the majority of aircraft engines built from small fighters to full-on cargo aircraft by China were either less effective imported versions or just copies of Russian designs. When J-20s and J-35s began first flying around, it was noticeable that they had issues with their engines not being able to put out enough thrust for what the aircraft needed. That includes serrated exhaust feathers to help increase stealth and increase that thrust, but more isn't necessarily better. Typically, aircraft designers try to get away with only one engine if possible because it keeps things down like cost, weight, and maintenance time. So the decision to go with three engines is even more confusing when you
Less moving part, the better. One engine is just better. Same thing in like engines itself, like car and vehicle engines. Why do you see one piston bikes a lot compared to everything else? Because it's like one moving part. You don't have to worry. Like maintenance is easy. Then two piston, three piston, inline four. Damn, like if shit goes wrong, like that will cost you a fortune.
look at it from that angle. One analyst speculates that it's possible that the centerline engine could be entirely different than the outboard ones on either side of it. On this design scenario, the center engine would likely be for that subsonic flight, specifically during takeoff and the initial climb, before the aircraft reaches cruising speed and altitude. When it does, the outboard engines, more focused on supersonic flight, would
That
take
makes more
over.
sense. Opposite
This is a
of what I
common
said, but
issue
makes more
that
sense.
aircraft designers have to deal with when creating a new aircraft. Engines are typically either better at subsonic flight and agility or supersonic flight, stability, and speed. You can't have your cake and eat your cake too. But one article from the Telegraph gives an even different, very different take on this. Their claim is that it's laser cannons. With aircraft these days being designed with every bell and whistle you can imagine,
Why
and
they
some
are
you
though?
can't, it starts getting harder and harder to keep everything on the plane fully
Yeah, you don't want a laser to shoot out from the plane's ass to attack you. That's just disrespectful at that point. Why would their laser be there?
powered. You can't run things like avionics and targeting systems off a handful of AA batteries in a dream, so all electrical power in a fighter is generated from the engines. A laser cannon, or really any kind of directed energy weapon, would require what aeronautic experts are referring to as a metric ass load of electricity, more than what could be generated from just two engines. China has been putting a lot of effort into creating these kinds of systems lately, with a microwave gun recently reported to have hit targets 2 miles away. And it's not unreasonable to assume that in the coming years, that technology would be a small enough now to slap onto the side of a plane of this size. This also isn't some kind of crazy over-the-top idea either, as the United States has not only already begun experimenting with directed energy weapons on fighters, but the US Air Force has already come out and said that laser-style weapons will be a crucial design feature of their own 6th generation fighter. For the most part, any kind of modern directed energy weapon would primarily be for point protection, destroying incoming missiles before they hit. As it stands, no military has really managed to make a laser small enough to fit on an aircraft that could reliably take out other aircraft at a distance. A few seconds of getting zapped with a microwave gun.
Yeah, but frying the targeting modules and things of the missiles might as well render it useless. You don't have to explode the missile. Like, all the laser have to do is like fry the systems, and that's it. And then the rocket can just fly off in like linear distance until it explodes in a mountain or something.
Could be enough to fry all the tracking and maneuver electronics and turn an expensive missile into a gliding dud. One thing that you see thrown around in discussions about 6th generation fighters is the integration of drones. Rather than trying to squeeze every capability into a single manned aircraft like on a 4th or 5th generation plane, 6th generation ones usually include some kind of unmanned wingman style drone or a set of drones to be flown with each plane. These are designed to carry weapons.
Yeah, but see, that's the America's like description of sixth generation. China might not feel like that. China's like, okay, we don't need drones. Like that's different thing. And China is not even calling this sixth gen. It's like they are like working. Their naming scheme is like one generation behind what America calls fifth generation. They call it fourth generation. This is they're calling fifth generation. So they could be like completely different. Like, yeah, I don't care what you want in your sixth generation. This is our fifth generation type of way.
Serve as an extra set of eyes and take on missions that would otherwise be too dangerous, without putting your fancy new flying triangle into actual danger. In December of 2024, China unveiled their FH-97A that would serve this exact purpose and can carry out both air-to-air and air-to-ground munitions. It's also capable of controlling its own smaller FPV drone. It's like a Russian nesting doll of man-made horrors beyond comprehension. One interesting design choice are the 18 distinct segments on the back of the fuselage. Theoretically, these would be used to control the aircraft's maneuvering. Having 18 separate control surfaces is another case of complicated.
What? Why put that many there? Like, the more edges you put out, the more stealth it compromises. Like, why have that many like cuts? Like two here, two there. Wouldn't that have been better? But then again, like that requires a strong hydraulics. What if they don't have better hydraulics and they had to do that? If they have to mix this newer plane with compromises, they're already like, why are you making this then? Like, work on those things first. You don't have better engine, make a better engine first. Then think about making the next generation of plane. I don't know. Why have that many sections?
Complicating the design in order to achieve a certain level of performance, I think, and this could be an indication that Chinese Air Force doesn't expect to have the thrust vectoring on their engines anytime soon. If that's the case, China seems to be really brute forcing the on-paper capabilities of this aircraft. The United States Air Force for years now has been fairly open about China having
I like how Northrop Grumman probably seeing that and just laughing like, come on, man, come on. We did that shit decades ago, come on. Just do a force, vector, whatever that, right? Yeah, they probably did that in B2, right? And even F-22 has that. So yeah.
a real capability in building a future 6th generation aircraft. Back in 2022, General Mark Kelly, head of the Air Combat Command, said China was actively pursuing an NGAD style program themselves. He described it as an exponential reduction in signature, exponential acceleration of processing power, and sensing, end quote. That said, those are also things I would say if I was trying to secure funding from Congress for my own new fighter jet. So we'll have to see. But what do you guys think?
That's true. Oh shit, China's making some next generation plane. Ooh, we need to ramp up, sir. Give me money. Give me money. Congress like, fine, I'm not gonna think about it. There you go. More budget for you. This time is 900 billion, not 700. 200 billion just for you to make another one. Imagine people in the Pentagon, everybody just like, like high-fiving everything. Yeah, we did it, shit. Yeah, this is insane, man. Well, that was China's new stealth aircraft built to fight the US by their task and purpose. Who knows, man? There's way too much, like nuance to all this. There is no way in hell China ever even going to think about fighting US and vice versa because it would be too catastrophic. That's not how things work at this scale. Countries and powers have become so powerful nowadays. The major powers attacking each other. Nobody's even thinking that. I don't think that's ever going to happen, right? Because if that happens, we are all basically fucked. It's like timer start. It's like a chain reaction. Everybody's going to get screwed. But yeah. Right, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe and I'll see you next time.